Love teaches you to sign documents without reading them. I learned this on a Tuesday morning in April, 7 years into a marriage that felt like safety, dressed in routine. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and coffee brewed too strong. Michael stood at the counter, his tie already loosened, sorting through the mail with one hand while checking his phone with the other. He moved the way people do when they believe they're unobserved, shoulders forward, jaw tight, fingers quick. I watched him slide one envelope to the side, face down, before turning to kiss my forehead. His lips were warm. His eyes were somewhere else. "Student loans," he said. "I'll handle it." I didn't know then that this would be the last morning I believed him. The paradox lived in the ordinary. We had built a life that looked complete from every angle. A 2-bedroom rental with good light, matching dish towels, a shared calendar color-coded by priority. We talked about children someday, after the debt was gone. We talked about Europe, about buying instead of renting, about all the beautiful distance between now and later. What I didn't understand was that debt had become his second language, one he spoke fluently when I wasn't listening. This isn't fiction. This is how love disappears, one forged signature at a time. The world before the fracture felt like momentum. We worked, we ate together most nights, we fell asleep to the same nature documentary playing on loop because neither of us wanted to choose what came next. Michael was an accountant. I worked in marketing for a mid-sized firm that sold software no one understood. Our lives ran parallel, predictable, and I mistook that predictability for partnership. The debt was always there, hovering like weather we'd learned to dress for. Michael's student loans, $87,000 when we met, whittled down to $52,000 by our 5th anniversary, shaped our decisions the way chronic pain shapes posture. No vacation that year, no new furniture. We bought generic cereal and calculated grocery trips down to the penny. I didn't resent it. I thought we were building something together, brick by careful brick. He handled the finances. It made sense. He was the accountant, after all. I transferred my half into our joint account every month, and he paid the bills, managed the loans, kept the spreadsheets I rarely looked at. When I did glance at them, the numbers seemed to be moving in the right direction, slowly but moving. I remember one Sunday morning, late summer, when he showed me the updated balance, 48,000. We'd knocked off nearly 4,000 in 6 months. He smiled, a real smile, the kind that used to appear more often when we were younger, and pulled me into his lap at the kitchen table. "We're getting there," he said. His voice carried relief I hadn't heard in months. I kissed him and believed in our shared arithmetic. What I didn't see then, what I couldn't see, was the second phone in his car's glove compartment, the email sorted into a folder labeled archives, the rhythm of a double life beating just beneath our ordinary days. The fracture arrived on a Wednesday evening in October, nearly 2 years later. I came home before him, which was unusual. My last meeting had been canceled, and the autumn light was turning the apartment gold through the west-facing windows. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and noticed the mail scattered on the entry table where Michael usually stacked it. Among the grocery store circulars and utility bills sat a thick envelope from a bank I didn't recognize. It was addressed to both of us. I opened it without thinking. We shared everything. Why would this be different? The first page was a loan agreement. I scanned it quickly, expecting another student loan refinance offer, another credit card promotion. But then I saw the amount, $15,000. And below it, the date it had been opened, 4 months ago. And below that, in neat digital print, 2 signatures. Mine looked exactly right. The loops and slant matched perfectly. I had never signed this document. My heartbeat didn't race. It stopped, then stumbled forward like someone learning to walk on new legs. I read the page again, slower, my fingers leaving small indentations on the paper where I gripped too hard. Personal loan, 8.9% interest. Payment plan, 5 years. Purpose of loan, debt consolidation. Debt consolidation for what? The student loans were nearly down to $40,000. We'd been making progress. We'd celebrated that progress. Unless... I sat down on the kitchen floor, still holding the envelope, and opened my laptop with shaking hands. It took me 3 tries to log into our bank account because I kept mistyping the password. When the screen finally loaded, I scrolled through 6 months of transactions. There it was, buried in the deposits, monthly additions of $2,200 from an account I didn't recognize. Money appearing, then disappearing into loan payments that were larger than I remembered agreeing to. The refrigerator hummed. A car alarm went off somewhere down the street. The light through the window had turned from gold to gray. When Michael's key turned in the lock 20 minutes later, I was still on the floor. He saw me before he saw the papers spread around me like evidence at a crime scene. His face did something complicated. Surprise, then recognition, then a careful blankness that looked rehearsed. "Emma," he said. Just my name, nothing after it. I held up the loan document. "Tell me I'm misunderstanding this." He set his briefcase down slowly, like someone approaching a frightened animal. "Let me explain. Did you forge my signature?" The silence stretched. 3 seconds, 5, 7, long enough for me to understand that the question had already been answered. "Yes," he finally said. "But it's not. It's not what you think." The unraveling happens in reverse. Once you see the crack, you start looking for where it began. Once you find the lie, every truth you thought you knew becomes suspect. That night, we didn't fight. We sat at opposite ends of our small couch, a couch I'd chosen, that I'd loved for its deep blue fabric and the way it fit perfectly against the wall. And Michael explained. His voice was calm, measured, the same voice he used to explain tax brackets and investment strategies. He might have been describing weather patterns. There had been other loans. The student debt wasn't shrinking as quickly as he'd shown me because he'd been taking out new credit to pay down the old. A payday loan in 2021, a personal loan in 2022, another one last spring. He'd been juggling them, moving money between accounts, keeping the balances from my view. He'd needed my signature for this most recent one. The rates were better for joint applications, so he'd signed my name. He planned to tell me. He was going to tell me once everything was under control. "When?" I asked. "When exactly were you planning to tell me you'd committed fraud?" He flinched at the word. "It's not fraud when it's between spouses." "We're partners, Michael, not co-signers for your secrets." He looked at his hands. "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" "From knowing how bad it got." I felt something inside me go very still and very cold. How bad what got? That's when he told me about the credit cards. 5 of them, maxed out. Another $23,000 in debt I'd never known existed. He'd opened them gradually over the years, always meaning to pay them off before I noticed. But the interest kept climbing, and his salary hadn't increased the way he'd hoped, and the easiest solution had been to borrow more. The newest loan, the one with my forged signature, was meant to consolidate everything, a fresh start, a way out. "Except now there's no way out," I said. "There's just more debt, and this time it has my name on it, whether I agreed or not." He started to cry. I watched it happen from very far away, like observing someone on a screen. His shoulders shook. He pressed his palms against his eyes. He said he was sorry, that he'd been drowning, that he didn't know how to ask for help without admitting he'd failed. Every word sounded true and felt like glass. I should have comforted him. Some part of me, the part trained by 7 years of partnership, wanted to. But I couldn't move. I couldn't reach across those 2 feet of couch. The distance felt infinite. After he went to bed, our bed, though I would sleep on that couch, I pulled up every financial account I could access. I traced the path of our money like following veins beneath skin. The pattern became clear. Every time I transferred my half of the rent, my share of groceries, my portion of the carefully calculated loan payments, Michael had been redirecting it. Not all of it, just enough to keep the newest debt from collapsing. We'd been paying interest on interest, keeping 6 different wolves from 6 different doors, and he'd been orchestrating it all, alone. The strange thing was, I'd seen signs, small things I'd explained away, the way he checked his phone constantly, the mail he always got to first, how he'd suggested I stop looking at the bank account so often. "Just trust me, I've got it under control." The time I found a credit card statement in his coat pocket, and he'd said it was a client's left behind by accident. The time he'd been short with me when I suggested we use savings for a weekend trip, snapping that we couldn't afford it, then apologizing an hour later with flowers and excuses about work stress. I'd believed him because believing felt easier than doubting, and maybe because some part of me understood that if I pulled too hard on any single thread, the entire fabric would come undone. By dawn, I'd printed everything. Bank statements, credit reports, loan documents. I spread them across the kitchen table in chronological order and saw the truth. We'd never been paying down debt together. I'd been funding his private crisis while he kept me looking at a screen showing sunny weather while standing in a storm. The coffee maker beeped. I'd set it automatically the night before, back when I still lived in a different version of this story. I poured a cup and watched steam rise into empty air. The confrontation, the real one, not the shock of that first evening, came 3 days later. Michael had been sleeping in the guest room, leaving early for work, coming home late. We moved through the apartment like ghosts who'd once been solid. Neither of us knew how to be in the same space anymore. On Saturday morning, I asked him to sit down. I had papers prepared. I'd contacted a lawyer, not for divorce, but to understand my options. I'd pulled my credit report and found that my score had dropped 40 points in the last 6 months because of inquiries and new accounts I'd never opened. I'd called the bank that issued the forged loan and explained the situation. They had frozen the account pending investigation. They used words like identity theft and fraud claim, and I'd had to tell them it was my husband, and they'd gone quiet in a way that told me this wasn't the first time they'd heard this story. Michael sat at the kitchen table, our table, the one we'd bought at a garage sale and refinished together one long weekend, and listened. I spoke calmly. I listed facts. I showed him the papers. I told him what I'd learned, that I was legally liable for a debt I never agreed to, that his financial irresponsibility had become my legal responsibility, that trust once broken doesn't heal just because someone says they're sorry. I want to fix this, he said. How? He didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had the same answer he'd been using for years. He'd figure it out. He'd get it under control. He'd make a plan. Words that sounded like action but evaporated under scrutiny. I need you to move out, I said. His face crumpled. Emma, please. You committed fraud using my identity. That's not something I can forgive while you're sleeping 20 feet away. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Michael. But you needed somewhere to put all those secrets. Maybe you can stay there. It was the cruelest thing I'd ever said to him. I watched it land. I watched him understand that the person he'd married, the woman who believed in second chances and redemption, and working through problems together, had been replaced by someone harder, colder, someone willing to say true things that cut. He left that afternoon. 4 suitcases, his laptop, a box of books. He moved like someone underwater. I helped him carry things to his car, not because I wanted to, but because after 7 years, some habits don't break easily. When he drove away, I stood in the doorway and felt nothing. Not relief, not sadness, just the hollow recognition that this should hurt more than it does. The fallout was quiet. Our friends didn't know what to say. We'd been Emma and Michael, a unit, coupled in every social situation. Now we were Emma, and we were Michael, and the space between those names felt radioactive. People took sides without meaning to. Invitations dried up. Group texts went silent. I stopped trying to explain. How do you tell people that your husband built a second financial life behind your back? How do you admit you never noticed? I moved through days like walking through rooms with furniture removed. Everything looked right, but felt wrong. The apartment was too quiet. I started leaving the TV on for company. I'd come home from work and find it still playing whatever I'd left on that morning. News, cooking shows, sitcom reruns, background noise to fill the space where partnership used to be. I kept working. I kept paying bills. My bills now, sorted and simplified. I contested the fraudulent loan. The bank launched an investigation. Michael admitted to the forgery in writing, which made me legally clear but emotionally hollowed out. My husband had chosen debt over honesty, and when caught, had confirmed it in triplicate with notarized signatures. Some nights I'd find myself standing in the bathroom, staring at the spot where his toothbrush used to be, or I'd open the closet and see the empty hangers, and for a moment I'd forget why they were empty. Then I'd remember, and the remembering felt like falling. My mother called every Sunday. She'd never liked Michael. Too controlling, she'd said once years ago, and I'd defended him. Now her voice carried careful sympathy that felt like vindication, and I resented both of us for it. Are you eating? She'd ask. Yes. Are you sleeping? Sometimes. You can come stay with us. I'm fine here. I wasn't fine, but I wasn't not fine either. I existed in the gray space between states, functional but unmoored. I went to work, performed tasks, responded to emails. I smiled when appropriate. I laughed at jokes. I became very good at seeming normal. What I couldn't do was trust. Every bill that arrived felt like a potential trap. Every phone call from an unknown number sent my pulse racing. I checked my credit report weekly, waiting for another shoe to drop, another secret account to surface. It took 4 months for the investigation to close. The bank cleared me of responsibility for the fraudulent loan. Michael's name alone now carried that debt. His credit was destroyed. Mine was recovering. We were separated legally, financially, emotionally. All that remained was the paperwork to make it permanent. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt haunted. The reckoning comes slowly, in small moments when your guard is down. I found myself thinking about our wedding day. How Michael had cried when I walked down the aisle, how his hands had shaken when he slipped the ring on my finger, how we danced to a song neither of us really liked but that his mother had requested, how happy I'd been, how certain. I'd believed I was choosing a partner. What I'd actually chosen was a man who couldn't distinguish between protecting me and lying to me, who thought love meant carrying every burden alone even when that burden crushed us both. I thought about the years of sacrifice, the denied vacations, the postponed dreams, the careful budgeting. I'd given up so much to help eliminate debt that was secretly growing. Every dollar I'd contributed thinking we were building a future together had actually been funding a private catastrophe. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was temporal. He'd stolen years from us, trading our shared present for a fictional future where everything would somehow be fine. Some mornings I'd wake up angry, other mornings I'd wake up sad. Most mornings I'd wake up confused about how I'd missed it. Was I willfully blind or just trusting? Is there a difference? Could I have known if I'd tried harder to see? I replayed conversations, searching for clues, the time he'd been irritable about my suggesting we needed a financial advisor, the way he'd changed the subject whenever I asked specific questions about our progress, how he'd praised my career success and then immediately found reasons we couldn't use my raises to accelerate payments. Each memory now carried a shadow, the version I'd lived through and the truth occurring simultaneously beneath it. Friends asked if I was dating. I couldn't imagine it. How do you trust someone new when the person you trusted most turned out to be performing trust while undermining it? How do you build intimacy after learning that intimacy can be a cover for deception? One evening, nearly 9 months after Michael left, I was sorting through old photos, something I'd been avoiding, but finally felt strong enough to do. There we were, at his sister's wedding, smiling. At the beach that one summer we'd splurged on a weekend away. Christmas morning in our first apartment, surrounded by cheap decorations and expensive hope. In every photo, we looked happy. Maybe we were. Maybe happiness can exist alongside deception. Maybe I was happy while he was drowning, and he never thought to pull me down with him until he'd already forged my name. I found a note he'd written me early in our marriage, tucked inside a photo album. You make me want to be better. I'm so lucky I found you. M. I read it 3 times, trying to reconcile the person who wrote that with the person who stole my identity to hide his mistakes. Both versions were true. Both versions existed simultaneously. Love doesn't prevent harm. Sometimes it just makes the harm more complicated to name. The legacy isn't dramatic. There's no final confrontation, no moment of healing closure. Michael and I spoke twice more after he moved out, once through lawyers, once directly when he called to apologize again, his voice small over the phone, asking if there was any way to fix us. I told him there wasn't, not because I couldn't forgive the debt, but because I couldn't forgive the choice. He'd chosen secrecy over partnership every single day for years. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern. That's character. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday in May, 2 years almost to the day after I found that first forged document. I signed my name, my real signature, and felt nothing except tired. The judge was kind but efficient. 5 minutes to end 7 years. Michael wasn't there. His lawyer said he was too ashamed to attend. I wondered if that was true or just another story. I kept the apartment. I kept my name. I kept the furniture we'd chosen together because replacing it felt like pretending those years never happened. And they did happen. They were real, even if the foundation was fraudulent. I learned to see them as both true and false. We loved each other, and that love wasn't enough to prevent him from hurting me repeatedly while calling it protection. I still check my credit report every week. I still freeze when unfamiliar bills arrive. I still feel my breath catch when someone says they're handling something for me. Trust, once fractured, leaves splinters even after the wound heals. But I also started dreaming about things I'd stopped imagining. Travel, not someday, but next year. A house with a garden, purchased in only my name. Maybe, eventually, someone who understands that partnership means transparency, that protection without consent is just control wearing a gentler name. I saw Michael once, 6 months after the divorce. At a coffee shop downtown, he was with someone, a woman I didn't recognize, laughing at something he'd said. He looked lighter somehow, unburdened. Maybe he'd finally dealt with the debt, or maybe he'd just found someone new to share the weight without telling them how heavy it was. I left before he could see me. I don't hate him. Hate requires energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. What I feel is sadness for the people we were and recognition of the people we became. He taught me that love isn't enough without honesty, and that safety is an illusion when built on secrets. Those are hard lessons. I wish I'd learned them differently. Sometimes late at night, when the apartment is dark and the city sounds filter through closed windows, I think about that Tuesday morning in April when Michael kissed my forehead and told me he'd handle the student loans. I think about how easily I believed him, how trust feels like love until the moment it becomes evidence of naivety, how partnership can hollow out from the inside while looking perfect from every angle. The documents are shredded now. The debt with my forged signature is gone from my credit report. The joint accounts are closed. Every financial tie has been severed. What remains is memory and understanding. Memory of who we were. Understanding of why we couldn't stay. I don't wait for anyone anymore. I built a life that doesn't require rescue or partnership or shared debt. Some people call that lonely. I call it safe. Maybe someday I'll call it something else. For now, it's enough to know that the only signature that matters is mine, placed freely on documents I've actually read. Love taught me to sign without looking. Loss taught me to never sign again without clarity. I sleep well now, alone but well.